You have a real opportunity to set Iowa in a different trajectory from going from a top 20 program to a top 12 program, and it starts through the running back room. That is key. Welcome back to the ANF Podcast, where we cover Iowa sports. Today, we're going to do a breakdown of the Iowa versus Troy game, also cover major highlights of the non-conference schedule, then move into a prediction of the Iowa-Minnesota game, move through how they're going to attack us, how we're going to attack them. Thankfully, we're just in this position where we're not the saddest fans of all time. We escaped Troy. It felt like the classic non-conference loss where, massive plays can also put you in a bind in the fourth quarter. You think back to the Ball State game from 2014 and Western Michigan game from last year, and even the Kent State game. When you play so close to the vest and you're not explosive on offense and you're kind of predicated on not allowing defensive explosive plays as well, when they do happen and there's disastrous plays, like college football strikes, essentially, we become, very tight as a fan base very quickly because you understand, we're not going to go two plays in a touchdown. So when the game does break out against these lesser opponents and execution is required, you have to get nervous, and it happened on Saturday.
I think, honestly, the biggest credence I can give after the game is Kirk at the end of the half. I think everyone in that room wanted us to just flip emotion. We didn't want to have to sit through a half of being down by 4 to Troy. You wanted to end on some kind of positive emotion. Kirk just understood you're seeking short-term happiness. The odds of us executing 2 or 3 throws for 15 to 20 yards and leading to a long field goal in comparison to the likelihood of a pick, strip sack, or anything negative, it was at best 50-50, and you're a good team who's been running the ball. You're going to take over this game.
Yeah.
Let's not lose ourselves in the moment. I think Kirk gets hated on a lot for that decision, but it's really understand the full picture and saying, okay, these are still kids out here. They're very much caught in this moment. I'm not going to let their emotions dictate how we play right now.
Let's go talk it through. I agree with you for the most part. I think going into that possession, I knew, we being Iowa fans, what was going to happen. He's going to run the ball and get to halftime. I disagree. After he gets the first down on that second run, on 2nd and 6, you run for 8 yards. There's still 16 seconds left in that timeout. You're at the 37-yard line. I think the general sense, even in the NFL, against good defensive lines.
What's the play call?
That's a great question.
4 deep and you're running against a 4 high?
There's no obvious play call in that situation, but I think after the first down, you're almost playing to the fence.
I think I could be persuaded into running the ball again, try and get an explosive run.
Yeah.
I could not be persuaded into throwing a 50-50 ball where they're going to have the advantage.
Yeah, I get your point, and I think given our personnel, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to start with the offense, and we're talking about this game as almost like a non-conference breakdown. You have 3 games, essentially behaves like your preseason for conference play. And the number one thing to highlight on offense is Caleb Johnson. And I don't think we've done that enough on this podcast. If you would have talked to us after the Nevada game in 2022 or the Purdue game, we would have told you this was a guarantee that he was going to be at this level. But ever since that Purdue game in 2022, it never felt like it was going to happen. Last year he ran for less yards than he has at this moment. And we were critical of him for, not lowering his pad level and finishing runs and, critical of his ability to change directions. And obviously he's corrected those 2 things, but it's just so many aspects to Lester's getting him in space. The O-line's getting him to 4 yards with no contact. He's added those 2 things to his bag. And he has that core thing that we all saw the first time he touched the ball for Iowa is that house ability, that acceleration through the hole, and then that smooth stride at 8 yards where he can get 80 yards and make it look easy.
I think it's twofolded. You have Lester's addition where he's now, previously in O'Brien, it was kind of a telegraph scenario where anything involving Caleb Johnson would usually be to the outside, and it was almost always 2 D gap. You look at his first touchdown run of the game, well, not first touchdown run, but first long run of the game against Troy. It was a sweep outside where we're using that similar concept we talked about in the past, where you influence defenders. They think they have to get to D quick. All of a sudden you've had 2 perfect influence steps by the defenders, and everyone can get up and engage in their blocks. And that play ended up hitting actually behind Logan Jones on backside A. So you're getting Caleb Johnson downhill in A gap, which is an incredible feat because that's where he's best. And I think the true aspect of this is that he is taken another step in his belief in himself. When he sees something, he does not doubt whether he should be going into full excel. I think he was always kind of looking for the obvious hole to evolve when he was, the last 2 years. If something was dramatically there, then he'd be successful. But now he's kind of making his way through the blockers. And we've talked about this in the past, how it takes a while for running backs to develop the vision. It's like a very
broad term
that's used a lot. But what that is just pattern recognition and then chunking it faster than you used to, and then actually having confidence to action something off
exactly.
that.
Be decisive.
He is now into this new tier of back where it's like he's seen it like a pro, and you're combining incredible like world-class athleticism with a sophisticated back, and that's how you have the leading rusher in the country.
Yeah, which that last sentence, you have the leading rusher in the country. And if you would have said that after, before the season started, Caleb's going to lead the country in rushing after 3 games, and we understand what our defense is and generally what our special teams is going to be, you'd be like, well, we're ranked 10th, right? And we have a good shot to go 11-1 and compete against Ohio State if that's the case. And to sit here in this situation with those both being true, you still have a good defense. You're holding, teams to less than probably 50 to 60 yards per game rushing, and you had the leading rusher. Generally, in those 2 stats live in Iowa, you're going to win easily. And we've kind of had a clunky start in these last 2 games. It's been a very odd start to the year. But I think the next thing to break, actually, to get even a bigger picture on what Caleb's doing so far and how that's important for this program and having the leading rusher, it's the first skill position outside of tight end that we can sell in a long time. And we've done a holistic look at Iowa's program, through plenty of discussions over the last few, over 30 episodes. One of the main points we've made is what's kind of held this program back for the 20-something years of Kirk's been here has been the running back room.
And where it was elite was in the early 2000s was the running back room. You had Jermel Lewis and Freddie Russell.
Yeah.
Sean Green. And that moved into Sean Green and, Jewel Hampton.
Marcus Coker.
Yeah.
And if you're a defensive-minded team that focuses on line of scrimmage play, running back is the next step, right? It should have been a part of this program for the entire of Kirk's, entirety. How does the bell cow pitch not work? The 25 carries a game, 150 yards behind a good old line. How is that pitch not translating into more 4-star, high 4-star running backs? And that's broken down through, lacking in the pass game, not allowing you to run.
We used to use that critique a lot, was the lack in the passing game. Passing game isn't exactly a dynamic force right now, but you're still going out and running the ball at a clip that we haven't seen, since the early 2000s.
Right.
I think you have to rely then on Tim Lester being that difference. And we talk about that, pitch sweep as being like the modern outside zone. That has truly changed this offense. And you see, CMC run it all the time where he'll catch on the edge, everyone freaks out, and he gets up the middle. And you see a lot of his touchdowns from 60, 70 yards from that exact play.
Yeah. But I think the main point I want to make is Lester is doing a great job. He does have two advantages. His O-line's extremely old, and there's been really good reps by all individuals in the run game, especially both the tackles in the run game this year. But Caleb Johnson is the key, because no matter how well these plays are blocked, if it's Moulton, Williams, Patterson carrying those balls, they're not the leading rusher. That point where he gets to the 3rd level and then houses it or gets 50 or 60, that's because of him. And that's what offense is about, is explosive players. And we need to get to the point where our running back is explosive, where not only can we get him to the 3rd level, but then he kicks in. His ability kicks in. And that's where we don't have a 25 running back yet. We're going to have a huge NIL bag once the defensive guys all graduate and K moves on after this year, after this class moves on, the senior class. You have a real opportunity to set Iowa in a different trajectory from going from a top 20 program to a top 12 program. And it starts, and it makes sense how this program is built, through the running back room. That is key. And so I think that's where I sit is, this is fun right now. You got 9 more games with Caleb. He's going after this year to the NFL. It's pretty clear. Capitalize on it. Have an opportunity where you can change this program on the recruiting trail. You have a real pitch. You have a real film to show. You have stats to show. You got to capitalize.
Next time you're looking for an all-inclusive beach vacation, consider Via Puesta del Sol or Via Puerto Escondido, both of which overlook the Pacific Ocean in Ocotal, Costa Rica, providing an exceptional all-inclusive experience for your family and friends. Visit their website, linked down below, for more information or to reserve your trip today.
So I think this goes into what Saban said in College Game about paying the right guys. We might have a lot of extra cash going in next year, but if you don't identify the talent that needs to be added, it's going to actually be high level. You're still going to be competing against all these other teams for premier backs. It's going to be a sketchy situation. Hopefully thing is you want to start building as a stable of backs that you recruit well. And this recruiting pitch is going to sell really well. But there hasn't been this level of success in the Midwest running the ball. I mean, Minnesota's had moments, but the guys always end up flaming out because they get 45 carries a game. It's really more of a quantity than quality. And Wisconsin's completely abandoned the run. You could probably say Nebraska's in that same realm with wanting to be a pro style.
Yeah.
But this is truly like where we're running under center pitch that's running back's dream.
Yeah.
So that, like you said, that's a really good differentiator
100%.
and way college football is moving. Being the tough-nosed running the ball team against these defenses that are used to playing spread, not used to being put in physical situations. I mean, we're essentially describing why Minnesota has been successful for the last 5 years. Is they played that equation, and it's worked for them.
Yeah. So I think it's time to break into what we saw for the first time is the Sullivan package in the red zone, and what we anticipate will be on third down short too. If you want to take the lead on that.
So why you have QB read added to your game is out of shotgun running is very susceptible to C-gap blitzes. When you're out of shotgun and you don't have an edge protector, you don't have a tight end, you don't have a wham back coming. Like they have a free run at you no matter what. They know where you're going to be. They know where the mesh point's occurring. So Cade, you saw it with Cade in this Troy game where when we're lined up out there, you kind of feel a little limited. You don't really have an ability to action something quick where you can get to the edge and you can have like either a run option or a quick pass like you saw on the goal line with Sullivan. That really limits your whole shotgun package. And I think if you want to run RPO as well as you can, which I think is really building out to be a strength of this offense, our RPO scheme kind of solves our bad passing offense because you get big receivers like RVZ over the middle, and that's an easy throw and catch.
Yep.
And we've talked about it like a million times, but we have to incorporate that as a struggling offense. It's a cheat code within college football. That's why Sullivan being a larger part of this game plan makes a lot of sense. We called for it prior to the Troy game, and we said, hey, short yardage. I was going to really struggle with Cade going under center because we can't run the sneak under center. We can't run any read options out of shotgun. It was cool to see Sully get that first goal line opportunity because it's like, okay, they're starting to see the same issue. I think we'll actually see him be a package not only on goal line, but you'll see fourth down in plus territory where you really just want to try and execute. And there isn't a lot of space to operate where you can't throw the deep ball. I think that's where Cade separates himself is that they believe in his deep ball better than Sully's, and that's why you won't see a lot on our side. And then I think we'll actually start seeing a little bit of first down play calls as well, where you're just trying to get 4. There's the way Lester designed his first action, where you see that, you see jet motion, you see a read option, all that happens so fast, and it's a very difficult thing to process from anyone that's coming off C-gap. And then you just get, guys in space and easy plus minus equations. And I think that ease is what I was really requiring in this short yardage scenario. You've seen Cade and shotgun operating out of 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4. It looks like it's a high wire act for something that's short yardage. I think as we move forward, I think just adding Sully in over and over again, it's going to look a lot like what Michigan and did with Cade too. It's like we can't use our full playbook, so we're just going to supplement you.
Right. It addresses our biggest issue, which is third and 1 in the red zone. We just under center. We got even Illinois State had a good opportunity to stop us because we're such a limited playbook in that situation. As well as every single, good offense, even they took Drew Brees off the field and put Taysom Hill on the field for these situations. You can bring up McCarthy and Cade in 2021 for Michigan. Even Michigan with McCarthy as their starting quarterback, a good athlete, would bring on Orgy to come in and run these packages. You see it all through college football, and even the offense we kind of always mention as like the pinnacle of 2000, Midwest football. 2019 Minnesota. Seth Green was a monster in 2019 in short yard situations, a power tight end running quarterback, because it just allows you to play the numbers game. You go from being, one man up against non-loaded boxes, a 6-on-7 look to an 8-on-6 look. Or you go from if they load the box and they put 8 defenders in, you go from being a 9-on-8 to a 10-on-8. And that is vital to getting that extra yardage because someone's going to have to make a freaking play if the quarterback can run. That is the reality is when the quarterback can't run, you see these stops more often where it feels like it was blocked up well, but one guy kind of lost. When the quarterback can run, someone's going to have to make an insane play on the D-line or a perfect run through or they almost guess the mesh, who's getting the ball. And that's kind of how it plays out more rather than, man, they just kind of timed us up there and made a kind of a straightforward play rather than an elite play.
Yeah, and why I don't want to see, this is an important point to talk about too, but why I don't want to see Sullivan just get the reins is because we still have 9 games left, maybe more. And if you're going to play Sullivan in this read option, I'm going to play a QB who's going to take hits. And really what read option comes down to is I'm getting my quarterback on the edge where he now has to either make a safety miss or a corner miss and occasionally a linebacker. But those hits add up too. And occasionally when you play a running quarterback and you run those actions, you're going to get blitzed into, and then they're going to get a linebacker at full speed on your QB. And if you just continue to run your QB for 60 times a year, that doesn't sound like a lot, but 60 times a year, the odds of him playing clean and healthy through that whole group as a taller 6'5" guy, it's like running a tight end out of shotgun. Like, why don't you do that?
Right.
Because they get teed up. They don't have the center of gravity to protect themselves.
Make guys miss even a little bit. Yeah.
I think you're just going to need kind of this Megatron QB effort. And I don't think it's not traditional. I think that's why Kirk has been allergic to it in the past. We talk about Old Testament football. That's not in the Old Testament. You have one QB because you have the same cadence. You have, same QB center relationship. You have a guy getting in rhythm. You have a leader of the team. That's
controversy.
What we put into the Old Testament QB. I think if you see football through the New Testament, you see is the additions you can have by having a running QB. You certainly you do lose that aspect later. You lose, potentially you lose confidence in Cade, but also you create competition the same way. I think it's just schools of thought, and I think where we're at in short yardage, having this controversy or split reps is exactly what the team needs.
It's a good thing. I think it just raises the level of. It makes the playbook bigger, and it raises the level of the offense. There's no negative to having these packages implemented. I still think in the end, if you want a higher ceiling, you still want to have Cade incorporated in this offense. And that's
I think the highest ceiling is just the two of them together.
Exactly.
I think highest ceiling, when we talk about Cade's highest ceiling, I think attacking every part of the field. I think the deep ball outside the numbers, we saw him be very good against Troy outside the numbers. That's a tough throw. Sullivan really struggled with that if you watch any of his gameplay back. If we're going to play these, drop 7 and drop 8 teams like we saw against Troy where they're really, really passive, having a guy who's comfortable outside the numbers like Cade and his accuracy is going to be huge for our consistency. So again, this is
best of both worlds.
Best of both worlds.
The breakdowns have been kind of the story of the defense. And one small tidbit about all of them occurred on 1st and 10. And they occurred in situations where you didn't expect them to take a shot. Iowa State was down 2 scores. Troy was, down 10. You kind of expected them to be more of a grinded out team at that point. I can't remember when Troy's it was 1st and 10, but I can't remember when it actually happened, in terms of plays into the drive. But they're all on 1st and 10. And this is, Brahm is always the demon in the room when you talk about the counter to Phil. But what he did is when Phil was predictable in what he was going to call and being in a quarters coverage, you have the ability to attack us deep because we don't teach our DNs to pass rush on 1st and 10. We want them bull rushing and setting up leverage to stop the run. So if you go max protect, you run some sort of play action where you slow down their rush because they're thinking it's a run. And then let's say you keep a running back in that just you fake to, or you keep a tight end in, and now you create a 7v4 situation or even a 6v4 situation when these guys aren't employing pass rush moves. Now you allow yourself to have time and a pocket to attack 20 yards downfield on double move. And obviously, Wampa and TJ Hall had breakdowns. They, without a doubt, are breakdowns. And you can always put the player first in those situations. But they also the quarterbacks were in perfect situations to throw those balls. They weren't sped up. There wasn't pressure by a blitz. There wasn't pressure by a DN. So I'm not saying it's Phil's fault that these big plays happen, but it's not 100% on the player. I'd say it's still 20% on the play call and needs to just keep these guys off balance a little more. And good play callers will keep on doing this because they look across the field and Iowa's offense is playing well. We're running the ball for 150 yards easily from one player. We're explosive. We have a semblance of a pass game. It's a different formula in terms of how many points we need to score. So they will be more aggressive this year. And this is not going to be a flash in a pan. It might be a flash in a pan of less breakdowns because the guys are going to get more depth, but deep shots are still coming because they got to score. They don't want to run 40 times against this defense.
I think where we'll see it change is not necessarily in the coverage we're giving the guys out wide, but just allowing for more 1st and 2nd down pass rushes. And that's actually how we started to attack Brahm. So I think we were really frustrated with our after 20. What years did we lose to him? 2021?
21 and 2020. And so 2022, we started to implement more of the.
And we were really frustrated. Like, we have to start doing these, first and second down rushes. And then they actually came out and did it. And it was very successful. Forced interceptions, really disrupted them. I think there's two ways you can go about it. You can either start allowing for first and second down rushes, or you start moving into your blitz packages. I think Phil, through this non-con, has been very basic. He's usually very basic to the non-con. And then all of a sudden he'll start, as the year evolves, he evolves and evolves and evolves. And he has almost like 3 game segments where he's running the same things, but they change. And it's a way just to, not build out tendencies. But it's usually makes for sometimes a very painful non-conference because you're just seeing off coverage and curls are killing you. I think the big thing too for these DBs to realize is you're not allowing for the best part of this defense to play. Like we've mentioned before, the run defense has been fantastic. They've given up 1 lengthy touchdown, and it was a 3rd and 4 fade shot to Higgins. Like that's the only touchdown they give up on a long drive. Yeah, you're basically in perfect position as long as TJ Hull swats that down. When Phil gives you off coverage, he doesn't care if you give up 15 or 20. The idea is catch tackle. He will eventually give you a coverage to make a play, and eventually he'll put you on the front foot where they've sussed out essentially their first 2 or 3 ways they're attacking this defense. On that 3rd or 4th time, he's now going to give you a call for someone to make a play. Like, let that play come, let the whole game develop. That's where this team is going to develop into a very scary defense. It's because defenses in the past have understood that fact. It's like giving up a field goal in college football is not a big deal. It takes 3 of them to beat a touchdown. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of effort. That's a lot of learning just to get to 9 points. And if we can just back up moving into this Big Ten schedule and just let our best players play, our linebackers, our safeties, our D-line, play physical. Let our corners, who are physical specimens and really good tacklers, play in that space. I think that's where this defense will return towards normal form. It just might be a little more painful than the past because we won't be getting as many 3-and-outs and won't be getting our offense is good field position. It's just going to be successful in another manner, which is preventing touchdowns.
Right. Last thing to do for the non-conference is highlight 2 players. I think 2 seniors that really stepped up this year and we had expectations for. I think we always have appreciated how Hurkitt's played the DM position as a technical player in the run game. He's added, another level to his pass rush. He seems to be the one guy showing up in the starting 4 to get pressure the most often. Obviously, he's in the blind side position. That's our go guy. That's the guy we want to make plays. But honestly, surprised us how well he's played that position, and he's taken that next leap where it's someone you can count on to get home on a consistent basis. And then Jamari, I think it's so eerie how similar his season is to Ojemudia in 2019. Even the pick 6 he had, it's a classic levels concept against our squat corner that's also playing quarters / cover 2 coverage, and Ojemudia actually made the exact same play against Gabbert in 2019. And Gabbert's still playing for Miami, Ohio, but it was Gabbert's first start ever as a freshman. And Ojemudia does the same thing where you bait the flat. It's a levels concept, so he's being high-load by a receiver, 2 routes. You bait the flat, you got me, throw over the top of me, and they catch it almost the exact same way. And actually, Ojemudia had the exact same pick against Martinez in the last game of the season as well, where you kind of just backpedal and you catch it right in your chest. You're catching it like it was almost designed for you. And that you see these corners that play through Phil where he only has them run 2 or 3 coverages for their entire career. And by the time they get to 4 or 5 years in the program, they first learn how to do it. They learn to have, how to stick with defenders. And then you get to the next progression of understand how you're being attacked. And then you get to the influence level of, I know how I'm being attacked, and now I know how to trick your eyes and trick the quarterback's eyes, and it's a beautiful thing to watch.
The ANF Podcast is sponsored by Eye Surgeons Associates, proudly serving Eastern Iowa and Western Illinois for all your eye care needs for over 40 years.
So I think it's time to break into the Minnesota breakdown, and this is, honestly, these rivalry games are so fun to break down because, you think of, obviously, not Fickle, but Campbell and Fleck, and even Rule. But Campbell and Fleck, we've played them for so long. And you just have an identity of what this game's going to be. Now you add a lot of fuel to the fire. This is not only for this season and these seniors. You think of Castro, Higgins, Jackson, Schulte, Jamari, anyone that came back. They came back to compete for a Big Ten title. That's gone if you lose this game. In reality, You're not going to run the table or maybe lose Ohio State and then run the rest of the table and compete for a Big Ten title. And they also came back to beat Minnesota. That was one of the most stinging losses as an Iowa fan. You know it's a stinging loss to the players. It's not just a rival. It's the way the programs are presented. They're exact opposites. The head coaches, even though there's a lot of similarities, how tough they play, line of scrimmage focus, there's a reason why Kirk doesn't like PJ, and PJ knows Kirk doesn't like him. And I don't know if PJ doesn't like Kirk, but Kirk for sure goes, you're the exact opposite of my personality.
You go back to the 3 timeouts he took, in 2020. That was a pretty good. I haven't seen Kirk be that petty to another head coach in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota made the first faux pas of taking the timeout when they could have ran out the clock to score a touchdown down 35-0.
Mm-hmm.
But Kirk usually would just let that slide. And he didn't for some reason. I think that was also coming off of all the stuff that happened in 2020
Negative
around
recruiting.
Kirk. I think there may be some negative recruiting from PJ's aspect that he got wind of. And that's really, the rivalry is 10x of what it was under Kill or any other Minnesota coach in the past. I think it's because Minnesota's built a sustainable program.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, they are the exact same team. PJ is the only other coach in the Big Ten who's probably more conservative than Kirk.
Mm-hmm.
And I respect it because it makes them good in late games. If you watch a lot of Minnesota games over the years, they're usually in a pretty, muck it up game between 3 quarters. But when it gets late into the game, their style takes effect. They've built their O-linemen and their tight ends, 20 to 30 pounds heavier than you'll see Iowa have, a lot of other programs in the Big Ten have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about just making you carry their weight for the entire game.
Mm-hmm.
And PJ is waiting for that equation to take place in every game. He's not going to take chances. He's going to kick field goals. He's not going to go front and forth. He's going to back up on defense.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to limit mistakes as much as possible because he wants to be able to run the ball in the fourth quarter. And what we've seen from Minnesota and their success against us is when they usually win this game is big plays in the fourth quarter. And they're really buying their time for that moment.
Yeah. And they've only won it once.
Yeah.
But in 2021 and 2022, they damn near won it in the fourth quarter by running the ball.
Mm-hmm.
It's because that equation takes place. Like it's a barge of humanity. They go 6'6" across all 5 offensive linemen. Their smallest one is 6'6", 310. Their tackles are 330. They build their tight ends to 260. We have 260-pound DNs. We have Fisher and Jackson are 230-pound linebackers. We are outweighed by a lot in those positions. And our 2 biggest, heaviest guys, our D tackles, when they go heavy, they can double them with, 660 pounds sometimes, 640 pounds. And that's what they're trying to. They're trying to have this weight, as you mentioned, get to the fourth quarter and have that come to fruition. I think just going to how they attacked us last year and what I think we can start with their offense first. Obviously kicked it off, but this is Phil's last year. It was his first time playing this offensive coordinator, and he does have a different approach to Kirk Soraka. Soraka was more of an RPO scheme focused on stretching teams vertically. This guy's more have a horizontal basis of, boot action and, more horizontal concepts rather than just throwing over the middle a lot and more focused on the sideline, I'd say. But what they had the most success with, and what I think they're going to implement a lot in this game, just because of that weight advantage, and I think that's where their personnel advantage will be in this game, is they're going to put 2 tight ends on the field in a balanced formation where, have a tight end on each side, and then they're going to spread their receivers out as much as possible. And we'll counter with a 4-3 look. But last year, we did not roll down to that look. And so we kept 2 high safeties. So the end equation was a 7-on-9 the entire game. And they really had success in that concept because they could run the ball and have that numbers advantage with Athan pulling the ball. And they also could create a one-on-one matchup for Daniel Jackson in a lot of situations. If you watch the second half, it was Jackson the entire time. They put him on the short hash. So if you're on the left hash, they put him on the left side of the formation, isolate him on Jamari last year. That'll be Hall this year. And they just ran 4 different concepts with him. They ran a slant to him, curl to him, back shoulder fade, deep curl. And then they finally had the killer play where they ran him all the way across the field and he got 40 yards. And so they basically made it, we're going to run inside zone against your interior of your defense with a numbers advantage, or we're going to give the ball to Jackson. I think there's going to be a similar expectation for this year, but I think the key aspect that changes is Athan had legs and Brosmer does not. And that really changes. It goes from a 9-on-7 to an 8-on-7. And it's going to require them to play under center because any RPO, any read option fake won't be useful in that situation. We'll just run at the running back rather than attack the quarterback.
Well, I also think you can just blitz the mesh. So if they're going to be out of shotgun, which again, I think this is almost going to be predominantly under center, except for on third down. But if you're going to be out of shotgun with Brosmer, what I saw from him is he just gets unsettled. So if you're coming at him with pace, he's first off not going to be like, I'm going to pull this ball and be on the edge against Iowa's defense. That doesn't sound like a winning play. But then that also speeds up how fast he has to give it. Everything speeds up from there. Where they are really successful in that RPO action is when it's a delayed handoff. The offensive line gets to work a little longer, and then they have that backside C gap cut that's works so effectively. That's a play that takes time. So without them being able to hold that that pull, that D gap rush, you're going to have defenders playing a lot faster towards the run. I don't think they'll be as successful as they have been in the past 2 years because no Ethan. I also don't think we'll be as aggressive against their passing attack because I think Ethan was at a point where just Phil did not believe in him. He thought if he had to make the throw to win the game, it was not going to happen. And he was right for about 85% of the game until he made the big time throw to Jackson where Jackson had 5 yards of space. And I think that was what finally let him click out of his not being confident. He just had an ocean of space to throw to. He was missing throws outside the numbers. He couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. Against Brosmer, I think the plan of attack will actually be to slow play him. If you can get him in the red zone, where we just talked about where they're not going to have a QB read, you're going to be able to play the run game fast, and then you're going to have his weaker arm be tested into short windows. I think that's where Iowa has a chance to make picks. I think Phil will see this game as, okay, passing TD versus interception likelihood for a full length of the field drive. Do we get a sack? Do we get a strip sack? What's that equation at? I think you're probably leaning towards turnover or stop more often than not in that scenario. So that's going to lead to Iowa being what you said. I think very passive with how we align early between the 20s. We're just going to say, take your field goals. You guys had 4 of them last year, but you didn't score a touchdown, which is just crazy to loss that we lost the game without giving up a touchdown.
With 2 red zone turnovers too.
Yeah. So I think we're going to believe in our red zone rush defense. And what that's going to lead to is hopefully a lot of passivity from our DBs and just letting this team get to a point where it gets to be the strongest it can be, and that's inside even like the 35.
Yeah, and I think actually another plan of attack that they've used since, I want to say 2021. It might have been 2019 as well, but it's a counterplay to their inside zone. So obviously they want to run, out of shotgun. Let's say the running back's on the right side of the quarterback. They've developed this pitch play that Penn State actually ran it with Saquon Barkley against us in 2017, and I think maybe in 2018 as well. I can't remember if I remember Barkley for sure ran it. But what it is the quarterback obviously takes the snap, and then rather than handing an inside zone that's going across his body, he then pitches it to the right, and it becomes a counterplay instantly. And it's very similar in design to our Caleb Johnson pin and pull pitch that looks like it's going to the edge. It's like your play side D tackle, play side D end that looks like they're going to be backside before the snap is now play side, and there's a pitch occurring. So you're now trying to stop C gap. And so is the play side linebacker right when that occurs. And so they're all getting pressed to the sideline, and they're in a 3-on-4 disadvantage right when the play starts, just based on our alignment. So it's a play that, like, by alignment, we're kind of screwed already. And then it has a really nice design where we almost always overflow because we're so worried about giving the edge. It's kind of the aspect of this defense is D ends just don't give up C gap to an edge. Don't ever get hooked. And then the play will end up flowing inside between guard and tackle and guard and center. And honestly, I've never seen it not go for 10. It's one of those plays when Minnesota runs it, they run it in usually the second half when they need a big drive, or maybe a second half, second quarter run to kind of get their offense going. And it goes for 10, maybe 15. Bucky Irving was the scariest guy to run it because he had that really good speed. But it's a play that they're going to run again. And I don't know if Iowa has a counter for it, just based on how we play 2 high safeties and our one tech is instantly out of the play, and we're just not really in position.
You'll need the backside safety to play that fast.
Or a heroic play from one of those defenders that are on play side.
Well, I think the understanding is what you just described is you don't actually play this out wide that fast. Let this develop, let it spill to our edge, and hopefully let our safety clean up in the C gap.
Yeah, or the corner.
Yeah. Another thing they do is by lengthening the the amount of tight ends that they have. Well, they'll do 2, 3, sometimes even extra O linemen. They extend that edge so far. So you'll see teams try and come off the edge, but they've had it designed and mapped out where these O linemen are so large that length gets pretty long down the line. And what it allows for is runs to A and B being a hell of a lot more effective because those guys who try and get off the edge, they're just way too late. And you see teams constantly try and stop runs interiorly through that action. That's really not the way you want to do it. You want to build up through the middle and push everything out wide. And if really what you'll be looking for is if we're having success against the run, is if that running back is getting spilled to outside tackle, outside tight end. And if you are consistently seeing them, set up a cut outside, then come back inside between guard center, and it's going for 3 or 4, and that equation keeps on getting played over and over again, that's going to be a bad sign for at least them holding on to the ball. Again, this all kind of changes a little bit once we get to the red zone because you're going to be rolled down. You're going to have extra D linemen on the field. And that's where I think they'll get stopped. But I think they're going to do a really good job of possessing the ball through the run game and then the use of Jackson outside. Because I think we're going to do everything we can to stay over top of him and just make Brosmer make the makeables. Yeah. If they want to move the ball through 10-yard curls, let them do it. Just got to tackle.
Yeah, and I think this is a good time. We've obviously just broke down how they're going to attack us and the personnel, their, what formations they'll be in, what plays they'll run. But just based on just their personnel, like the bodies, the Jimmies and Joes. Darius Taylor is a great back for the system because he just gets extra yardage. He's not crazy fast. He's not crazy elusive, but he's Minnesota's done such a good job of recruiting guys that just can rub off defenders. And Marcus Major, their backup running back, they really have a two-headed monster if they want to use it. They both run the same way, and they run like every PJ back ever. They just have such a low center of gravity. They run with a great tilt. They obviously have that perfect way to hold the ball where they never fumble. But what they really do is they don't really make massive jump cuts. They make slight changes to their body that allows people to roll off their backs or in front of them. And they're so strong in their legs and their lower body that allows them to pick up extra yardage. And so they don't really need a lot of space to get 6-7 yards because they just run in such a compact way, trying to get yards rather than get touchdowns. And they do have the personnel with their O-line and the running backs to be successful on the ground. But I think Brosmer not being a runner, it just changes their equation a lot more than they had last year because losing that extra body in the run game, I think will come back to bite them against Iowa in this situation where we're not going to be required to be as aggressive by rolling somebody down. It will be a little more comfortable having that backside C-gap defender just flying to the running back every play on inside zone. And any look where Brosmer's like, I might keep it. It's like, we don't care. Get to the edge, man. We don't care if you're running. You don't want to be out there. We want you out there. That fake doesn't matter to us. And then going into the receivers, we've obviously mentioned Jackson. Going into our season preview, we kind of mentioned him as a good player, maybe all Big Ten, not top 5. Rewatching the game last year and just watching more of his highlights, he's really good. He is going to have a shot at the NFL because he's such a unique body type. Rarely do you see so much strength in a guy his size and his build. And then his route running is just really dynamic. 1 foot cutter. And then when it gets to the ball, if he has a half step, he's still going to make the play. So even if he's not open, he has the opportunity to kind of high point and kind of body you.
Yeah, I think that's where he separates himself, is just route running. And that's a difficult thing to even evaluate because you're like, why does this guy keep on getting open? Because once he's open, he's not necessarily going to run away from you. Mm-hmm. So how did he get to that position? But then you see his timing and all that stuff. You can see he's just a really well-developed Big Ten receiver. Outside of that, though, they're just kind of big bodies. They kind of remind me of what the 49ers do. It's where we're going to get our guy in a one-on-one situation. Now we expect a broken tackle. Yeah. That's, running backs, receivers, tight ends. They're not going to be someone who's likely going to get behind us. I know we had those fateful words against Noel, but they really don't have a slot burner that's going to threaten you up the seam. I don't know how Phil's going to play that, though, because I think there's two schools of thought around that. It's like, do you want to speed up this operation by blitzing them more than you usually would, going to more man-to-man, because the odds of a catch being, a catch going for 60 without a lot of speed in the field is not very high, but then you can really speed up Brosmer and get him off his spot. I could see that being more of a thing within the red zone where we're like, let's just speed up this operation. Let's not let him be on time for these fade routes we're going to see under Jackson. Or you could just go very passive where you say, hey, we're going to play this tackle game. We think we can tackle you guys. North Carolina was in that scenario a lot of times where if you watch that game back, if North Carolina just came out and tackled the players, they would have had a lot of stops. So I think Phil's going to lean on that early. I do think there will be a nuclear point in this game, though, if we are down or if it's getting late in the game and it's tied and they have a drive that they need. I think that's when you'll see actually Phil go to the light him up because I think Brosmer is a little bit shaky under pressure.
Yeah, I think you broke that down well. Like Spencer and Brockington, solid guys. They would probably, play for Iowa. They're not going to worry us about beating us for the entire game. If they each have 7 catches, that's probably a good thing. If we can eliminate Jackson, they're not, super dynamic guys. Big bodies, that's about it. And Brosmer, I think that's like the final evaluation is him as a QB. Essentially they just recreated Tanner Morgan, and that's what they were looking for in this situation. They had Athan, big-armed athlete, and they just went to the exact opposite guy where we just want a guy who plays on time, gets the ball out, is accurate. We don't really care about arm strength. He definitely doesn't have legs either. Like, you're not going to run him, as we mentioned. He'll scramble for the 3rd and 4, but when he's out in space, you can see he's trying to get down. And, he played against UNC and fumbled in a massive moment because he just couldn't protect himself, couldn't protect the ball. So that's kind of the breakdown of their entire personnel. And I think it's time to move into how we expect to attack them on offense.
Yeah. The talent of their defense is their defensive line. This is the first time where, PJ's had some really talented D-lines. I think this is his most complete one where they go too deep and every single guy looks the part. Even their D tackles look a little bit leaner than they were in the past. They're going to play this entire game through what they think is their strength. So what's that mean? That means they're going to likely be very passive against our pass. They're going to want to do exactly what we just talked about, where it's extending drives, forcing execution over the long term, letting us get into the red zone because now we have to play with these D linemen and they are playing a lot less space. How I think Iowa can be successful against this system is through passes outside the numbers. I think they are very passive in what they allow out there. Having first down passes with Cade seems like the way to go. I don't think we're going to have much success within the screen game. I think that's the thing I noticed with them is they are very much, this is my offensive lineman. If he's going anywhere, I'm going with him. And we saw that from Iowa State early. When defensive linemen are playing that style of football where they're not just trying to go by people, it's very difficult to switch, trick them with the screen. I think overall this defense is just really smart. They're not going to take the chances to allow big plays. But that hesitancy and that lack of aggression is going to lead to Iowa having some opportunities to be consistent within the passing game, which is where Cade needs to find himself. He's going to have to be very on time and on target with this passing. But this is really where you want him on your team. This is the skill set you need to show where, hey, you're going to have a lot of, windows that are going to be tough to make. Right. It's going to be tough reads, but we haven't seen him really misreading stuff, especially in that Troy game. He had a lot of these same equations he's going to be playing.
Yeah.
He didn't misread a lot of stuff. And I think that's a good sign for this game.
Yeah. I think you broke it down perfectly. I think the strength of this team, even I'd go to highlight their starting DNs, Joyner and Strigo. That's like, if you can point to one thing PJ's done well, it's just focus on line of scrimmage play here. He nailed both these recruits. You have, high 3-star, low 4-star recruits in their junior and senior year. Both have a great shot at the NFL. Both have pass rush and run stopping abilities. And it's really the strength of this entire program right now is those two guys, which presents a lot of issues for us. That's where we kind of want to attack is on the edge, but it also opportunity to slow those guys down through boot action, through play action, through, any way we can trick them and slow down their best players. That is kind of the focus of every offense coordinator is actually not to run away from the best player, but to slow down his eyes in any way. And sometimes put him in and have no one touch him because then he's, not being blocked by anybody.
Yeah. And I think another key piece of this is they do the same thing that Iowa State did, where they show you kind of a pretty picture. It's like a off coverage, off slot. But then at the hike, they break fast. And that's really a common call for them in 2nd and 10, 2nd and 9, when they think you're going to try and, sneak an inside zone quickly. That's why RPO is going to enter back into this game. We didn't see a lot of that against Troy because they weren't playing that catch you football. When you play this late, drop to attack, that's where RPO comes in. So that will be another key piece is, how well do we action that? Are we catching them? Can we get guys moving with pace over the middle? Hopefully Caleb Brown's part of that now because I think he's like the perfect guy to use in that scenario.
100%. And one key, obviously it's an umbrella defense. Most time it's like a squat corner on the short side of the field where they put Wally in a tough situation to kind of high-low for 12 yards. Wally being injured it sounds like he's going to be out for this game. It sounds like a knee injury. He's obviously the best player on this defense other than the DNs. They've nailed their transfer portal bringing in Robinson. If they had Robinson and Wally for this game, like, that presents a lot of problems. You're playing 2 good corners and 2 DNs. Like, that's kind of the really
Crux
good
of the
defensive
defense.
aspect. Yeah.
Yeah.
And having Wally be out, it's going to be interesting how they handle that. The pressure they put on that corner in terms of like what coverages they give him. But generally what you saw is 2 high safeties, squat corner on the short side, and then, a cover 4 concept on the wide side of the field. And they're just trying to force every throw to the wide side. And that's where Cade's going to have to execute outside the numbers, which we saw against Troy, and he did well. And it's really important throws for him this week. But then they'll show you that pretty picture. And then what they like to do, and it's actually kind of strange how they only almost have like 2 concepts. It's either the shell defense or this late developing strong side, far side of the field blitz. So let's say you're on the right hash. Obviously, hashes are a bigger deal in college football. They'll come from your left side with 3 or 4 guys. It could be a safety, it could be a slot corner, it could be Henderson, their outside linebacker, could be sometimes a play side linebacker as well. But they blitz, but they never rush more than 5 generally. Sometimes they'll bring 6, but they'll bring 5 or 4 from one angle and then drop out the backside DN to the short side every time. It's always a short side DN dropping to that smaller part of the field. And so they're not, generally you want those guys to be 6'3", 240 pounds, almost quasi outside linebackers, but they're dropping,
Big guys.
big guys. So they're kind of out of position doing that, but they're not putting them in much space. And generally when you get blitzed, you feel
I can
like,
walk him through what the QB's seen out of that.
yeah, go ahead.
So when you have a strong side formation like that, if a QB is going to try and figure out, okay, where's the best place for this ball to go? I'm seeing strong numbers off coverage. My read here will be my second read. I'll maybe start left, see what I got there, come back to some late developing route over the middle. Maybe if they come with a blitz, I can go quick. But that's really not your thought, especially if it's off coverage.
Mm-hmm.
So his mind is now backside.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm probably going to maybe stay front side for a bit. But I'm going to come backside and get an isolated look.
Yep.
When you see that blitz action come quick to you, you're thinking, okay, they have to protect themselves in that blitz facet. They're going to roll to their blitz.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to leave me completely isolated on the look I already wanted. So then QBs will turn. You saw Max Johnson get caught with it twice. He goes, okay, I got front side blitz. That means I got numbers on the backside. And now Strigau's in back-to-back times is in the curl route spot.
Yeah.
And that's a really good design, but it's something that if they can consistently use, you can take advantage of it by throwing something short to the play side blitz. And that's going to be something quick, and hopefully that Lester has an answer for that. I think he probably will. And he likes to take that opportunity to be aggressive.
100%. And I think that's such a good point. Like, it was almost like once you kind of found the cadence of how they did it, where it was always to the far side of the field, they'd blitz that way and always drop the backside DN. It was like they run this every time. It's never anything different. And it might be the concept of non-conference opponents will show only 2 formations, only 2 blitzes, but then we're going to have some wrinkle when we get to conference play against Iowa. They're not going to just see the strong side blitz every time with the backside DN drop. Maybe we'll flip that in some aspect, or we'll have a different role where, we're actually rolling coverage to the weak side and dropping the, play side DN with that blitz coming. But the design of it is just trying to, you actually have to throw through the blitz when they drop to that backside DN, because now you're still seeing an even set, but you have all that space over there with generally that's your strong side of the formation. So you have 3 receivers. It makes for a tough throw. You got to throw to the far side of the field. You have pressure in your face, and you got to go pinpoint a ball with good DBs.
And they're trying to get bat downs there too.
And they're trying to get bat downs as well. So that is, if you want to go for one reason why we want Cade in that situation and not Sullivan, Sullivan's a bigger guy, probably a bigger arm, but you got to be really quick decision maker. You have to understand what you're looking at right away. You have to have prep on film work and get the ball out quickly and understand like that's actually where we have to attack. And then you got to execute it. And that is kind of the aspect of Cade can prove his point to not only us two and hopefully the fan base, but those are the throws that are going to be required to win this game, is seeing fire in your face and not being a college QB, but being that 24-year-old QB going, this is what I have to do. I know I have to throw into this. Mm-hmm. And it's just, I think it's a great opportunity for him.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting way how he attacks. I think there's going to be area outside the numbers. I think that's just how you attack these off coverage, not really big into blitzing. They're not trying to catch you a lot underneath. They're really just trying to make you execute. That's kind of PJ's whole philosophy of his team is let's let them execute first. We'll be aggressive when we need to be. It's very, again, same line of Phil, Kirk. It's all that same school of thought.
Yeah.
So 2 final things we want to bring up about how I was going to attack in the run game. We talked about the Sullivan package. If you're going to have this off coverage, they have these DNs that play really wide sets too. So they're essentially D and C gap defender. They're kind of ripe for the taking when it comes to read option influence. I think that's going to be a big part of this. I think it's actually where we break out a lot more first down runs with Sully, just because if you're going to give us that edge and you're going to make it a one-man play, this is a perfect time to use him. The next part too is if we're going to be under center, we're going to have to attack under center at some point because Caleb Johnson is our best player. We've seen sweeps with him under set of action where we'll have power and backside cuts. Being under center against these type of DNs, it's all going to be about how can we influence them on the edge. Do you try to hook them? Do you try and leave them and just try and get around them? Do you have different counters you use against them? It's all going to come down to, can you influence these guys enough pre-snap and post-snap to not let them be as impactful as they should? Because after that, if you can get your tight ends and receivers and guards up to these linebackers, safeties, and corners, they're not as big as Minnesota usually likes them. Their safeties are a little smaller than they were in the past. Newman used to clean up every single play we're in. They could just keep Newman in single high safety, let all the guys dive down and crash the gap, and then leave Newman one-on-one, and he make the play every time. That's not really the scenario they're in now. They don't have the tackling secondary I've seen in the past. They're definitely good tacklers, and they play hard. It's like a concept of Minnesota's defense is how hard these guys play. PJ gets them to play really hard on defense. They're not as dominant of run-stopping defenders that they have been in the past. And I think where we could see Caleb continue to have this really good season is in that same scenario where if we can somehow get that DN hooked or get him or leave him to a point where he doesn't know what scenario's in, we can get Caleb around him. Mm-hmm. And then you can get your really good run blocking tight ends and Hayden Large and Zach Ortworth up to Henderson and up to Lindenberg and get Caleb one-on-one with these safeties. I think that's going to be a really, really explosive play.
Yeah, there's no Winfield or Newman flying down. And I think that was I think we didn't have much of a offensive design last year that just put stress on these guys. And as big as they're built and how big their linebackers are and how physical the safeties were last year, we were just playing right into their teeth. Now we got to slow them down a little bit. They're not all burners. This team is more built to be physical and smart than it is to be fast. And if you can slow them down through fakes, slow them down through pre-snap motion, slow them down through post-snap, hesitation in any way Lester can create it. And then you get Caleb in a situation where you can make somebody miss. He's a better athlete than these guys. And I think that's where, if I'm going into like a prediction of this game, great line of scrimmage play on both sides of the ball. QBs are very similar. They might have a little more depth to their skill room, I'd say, as overall.
I think they're a head above at receiver, but I think our QB's just probably a head above theirs.
I don't know about a head above. I think slight above. But I think where the differentiator is, obviously Taylor and Major are good, but Johnson he's not the leading rusher on accident.
Yeah.
And if he breaks a 60-yarder in this game, Minnesota's not breaking a 60-yard run. Mo Ibrahim had some incredible runs in this series in 2022. That's the only time Minnesota's probably only ever been explosive against Iowa. Even when they had Bateman and Johnson and Rodney Smith and all these guys, it still was kind of a muddied up game. Iowa's got a defense that can slow this offense down. I think Iowa, for the first time, can be explosive in a run game in this situation. And I think that's why Iowa is favored by 2.5, is that Caleb Johnson is just a different guy in this game. And we haven't had that aspect to our team against Minnesota for so long. And without him, this game is going to be a battle. But with him and the focus that how we've embraced him as a coaching staff and the game plan aspect to us, I think that's what separates us in this game.
Yeah. You want to move into predictions then?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take Iowa 16-13. I think it's going to be a 2-touchdown game. I think both teams are going to be very passive in how they approach the game. I think you're going to see a lot of passive coverages. I think the under is one of the safer bets of the year. Again, we talk about the lack of explosion. Both defenses are going to make that a priority. We're going to call the game to make this game be played in the red zone, hopefully wait for the big mistake by the offense. I don't think either team's going to try and force the issue, especially given how the other team plays. They know if either team goes down by 2 scores, it's going to be a real tough time. I think they're both going to try to avoid that situation and look to some late play calls to turn the tides.
Yeah, and I think it's a great prediction for just the under, because we lost the Iowa State game when we should have won it. And Kirk can now kind of pull the reins back of the approach to this game. If we don't throw that plus territory pick from Cade, we win that game. If we just run the ball 13 times in the second half to start the second half, we win that game. And now going on the road,
I just think we were so aggressive with the pass in the first half of Iowa State.
Yeah.
I think if you came out with the vanilla system against them, they would have eaten it alive.
They would have, but the turnover might have cost it.
Yeah.
Because the momentum flipped. You didn't have the opportunity to pin them there. I agree with the call. I agree with that philosophy as a whole, is to be aggressive there. I think Kirk can still make a point that
road game too.
Must-win game, road game, massive rivalry. Let's not lose this. And, as a fan base, that's always tough to hear. But if you win the game, you don't care how you won it. This is one of those. This is truly everyone. We have to control this game. We have to look good. What matters in rivalry games is that you win, and that's what Iowa State proved. Like, we looked good in the Iowa State game for 99%. We led the game for other than 5 seconds. We should be happy right now, but we're not. Why are we not? Because we lost. This game is not about looking great and having a selling point for the rest of the season. It's about winning. And if you lose this game, the season is effectively, your goals are done. And it's crazy amount of pressure to have in a game 4.
It's a 1-game season.
It's a 1-game season, and to have it be a rivalry game and have what happened last year all kind of culminate in one game, man, there's going to be some buzz to this game. And obviously both teams have losses, but this is a crossroads for both programs. PJ needs a win. Ferentz needs a win. These teams need a win for this season. I don't know. It's got some stakes to it.
Yeah.
I love it. It's on NBC and night game because it's going to feel like that.
So my picks for the week are going to be Iowa minus 2.5, and then the under 36.5. I think there's a good chance it falls well below the under. I think we're going to see untold levels of passivity between the two of them. And then I think, as you mentioned, I think leaning on Caleb Johnson to take this game home and the ability that Lesser's had on isolating him in big moments, having a whole scheme built around him. I think that just continues to take root, and we're still, in game 4 of the system. It's going to get better from week to week. Hopefully, as this game goes on, we start to see even a more developed offense than we have in the previous 3 games.
I have 4 picks this week. I have Tennessee -7 at Oklahoma. I think that's a sniffy line. Oklahoma's undefeated at home, major program. Tennessee -7. That just screams they're going to win by 3 scores. Baylor +2 versus Colorado. Baylor is a sneaky old team. A lot of returning starters from last year. Lost to Utah at Utah. Kind of a grinded out game, and Utah is projected to win the Big 12 this year, so it wasn't a surprising loss. DeQuan Finn for Baylor. I lost against him when he was at Toledo when they played the Illini in week 1 of last year. Really dynamic athlete. Colorado's not a really disciplined team on defense. I think he gave him a lot of problems. This is another weird line. I think Colorado being favored by 2 at home is just a weird situation. Give me Purdue going on the road to Oregon State, +4.5. I think Purdue still can do what it wants to do. Obviously, you got boat raced by Notre Dame, but Hudson Card and Maccabee have been there for over 14 games now with an offense that knows how to use them. Oregon State obviously going through a coaching change, generally a down program. I think you're catching Purdue in a good spot to have them on the road. I like giving 4.5 points. I think it should be 2.5. So give me Purdue there. And then I'm going to do even one more pick. I'm going to go 4 picks this week.
Trying to get back in the green.
Yeah, this is not desperation at all.
No.
I'm going to do Michigan State +6.5 at BC. BC obviously just got controlled by Missouri, which was down by 2 scores, but made it look closer late in the game. And they beat Florida State, which is a big upset. But now it's looking like Florida State wasn't that good. Michigan State lost a game they could have won. Actually, they beat Maryland, but could have lost that game. Watching Maryland last week against Virginia, I think Maryland's a good team, and Michigan State beat them in a head-to-head game. I think Michigan State they have a quarterback that's dynamic. They have a good running back in Carter, and then they just had a Michigan State recruiting class for the last 5 years that kind of goes unnoticed when you have bad coaching. But you get those guys playing correctly. They have a good D-line, O-line, and they have good skill. I think, once again, BC that's an overhaul of a program that doesn't have the same, kind of recruiting base that Michigan State does. I think you have an opportunity to jump on Michigan State not getting enough credit as well as they're playing this early in the season.
You're betting against Boston College?
Yeah. All right. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.